Hey everybody, I'm here today to tell you 5 parallel parking tips and tricks. Now everybody knows that parallel parking is one of the hardest things to learn how to do when you're learning how to drive. But if you use these 5 parallel parking tips and tricks effectively, you will be able to parallel park safely, smoothly, and effectively. Now let's get right to it. Parallel parking tip number 1 is where you start will determine where you finish. Now this is what I mean by that. If you start very close to the car that you're parallel parking behind, so you start off, beside a car and then you parallel park into the spot. If you start off close to the car, you're gonna end up close to the curb. If you start off far from the car, you're gonna end up far from the curb. So with that being said, you can use this tip as guidance. If you parallel park your car and you realize that you're too close to the curb, then the next time that you parallel park, start a little bit further away from the car. So start, when you start parallel parking, you start beside a car, start further away. If you realize that you ended up too far from the curb, then start a little bit closer next time. So use that to guide you. Tip number 1, once again, was where you start will determine where you finish. Tip and trick number 2 is to leave a good amount of space in front of your car and behind your car. Now you do this for a few reasons. Firstly, you want to make it easy for the person in front of you and behind you to leave, and you want to give them some space to move. Secondly, you want to make it easy for yourself to leave the parking space. Thirdly, if the car in front of you per se leaves the parking space and you're really close to them, then the next car that parks in that space is going to have less space to use to actually parallel park the car. So you're also doing it for the next car, for the next person. Okay, so you're being courteous to everybody else as well as giving yourself some extra wiggle room to move when you have to leave the parking space. So tip number 2, once again, is to leave a good amount of space in front of your car and behind your car when you are parallel parking. Tip number 3, don't be afraid to correct your position, your final position. So when you parallel park your car, if you realize that you're too close to the curb, you can swivel your way into moving away from the curb. If you realize that you're too far away from the curb, you can swivel your way closer to the curb. If you realize that you don't like the angle when you're done, if you're not at a perfectly straight angle, perfectly parallel with the cars in front of you and behind you, then you can swivel to get to the right angle. So tip number 3 is don't be afraid to correct your position. Humble yourself. When you're finished parallel parking, if you're not happy with it, just correct your position. It's so easy to do, and it's good practice for maneuvering your car in a tight space. Tip number 4 is to practice with cones and boxes until you get it right. If you're just learning how to drive, or if you've been driving for 40 years and you simply are not comfortable with your parallel parking skill, then just place some cones or boxes, as imaginary cars, and use those cones or boxes to guide your parallel parking. And if you can do it a few times in a row, we'll say if you can do it 10 times in a row, with cones and boxes, then you can move on to doing it around cars, and you'll be less likely to actually get, scrape the cars or scratch the cars and stuff like that. So use cones or boxes, big boxes, as practice. I would personally place a cone or a box around, in the position of each corner of the car in front of me and behind me, the imaginary cars in front of me or behind me. So if I was practicing parallel parking, if I was practicing with cones or boxes, I would use 4 cones in front of me and 4 cones behind me, or 4 boxes in front of me and 4 boxes behind me, to represent the 4 corners of each of the cars that I would be using to parallel park with. And last but not least, tip and trick number 5 is if you're not happy with your angle, don't be afraid to restart. Now I mean your angle while you're parallel parking, not once you finish. So let's say you're parallel parking, you start reversing on your 45, and then you realize, I'm not on enough of an angle, or I'm on too much of an angle. Instead of trying to overly correct it, don't be afraid to just start again. Like, go forward, get into the position again, and restart. It's one of the best things that you can do, because starting fresh will teach you the proper method for sort of getting your car smoothly into the parallel parking spot. Learning how to correct is also a good skill, but just learning how to do it right every single time from the beginning is an even better skill. So don't be afraid. Don't worry about what everyone's going to think of you when you're, correcting your angle and you restart. Don't worry about what everyone's going to think of you when you're fixing your position once you've parallel parked. Just restart or fix your position. Just make sure that you're doing what's best for you as a driver and the cars behind you and in front of you. Don't worry about what everyone else is thinking. And that's basically it. In this video, I've gone over 5 parallel parking tips and tricks to help you parallel park smoothly, safely, and effectively. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Be sure to give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Let me know what your tips are for parallel parking in the comment section down below. And above all, please be sure to subscribe for more great car and driving videos just like this one. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.